Tell me sort of a little bit about kind of your background and your early sort of stuff and how you ended up playing in bands in Leeds.
Well, I was actually born in Leeds, but then I didn't move. My parents moved to Manchester when I was about 3, I think, and so I grew up in Manchester. But then I came back to Leeds University, and I was here for I don't know until very recently, so like 20 years, I suppose. And I kind of always have been in bands, always wanted to be in bands and things. And when I came back to Leeds, I suppose I did it because I was at university, so I didn't take it quite as seriously then. But then, eventually, I suppose faced with the prospect of getting a proper job, I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I should get a proper band together. So I put an advert up in the university union and met people, and then eventually, I formed a band called the Lost Pandas first, and then that eventually became the Wedding Present.
What was Leeds like then, as a sort of place to play in bands and watch bands?
It was a great place, actually. One of the reasons, partly I wanted to come back to Leeds because I was born here, and because Leeds University apparently was really good for mathematics, which is what I did. But I kind of opened the NME and saw all these kind of venues in Leeds, and there's gigs every night, and it seemed to be like a really kind of happening place for kind of rock music. So, the Runaways were playing at Leeds University. I thought, this is great, I'm going to go there. So, and literally that kind of first year I was at university, I think I went practically every night out to see bands. And there was because John Keenan had it's called the F Club, a venue called Brannigan's. He had a lot of great bands coming through all the time. Then there was obviously the bigger venues as well. And then there was local bands playing at the Royal Park. There was a wine bar downtown called Vivas, I think, and they had bands on every night. And so, as I say, literally I was out every night really watching groups. It was a really exciting time.
And what was it like as a place to sort of set yourself up? To sort of start playing and build up an audience and that kind of thing? Were you a local band for very long before you kind of broke through?
I suppose we were in a way, yeah. I think we suffered a little bit because, when I first came to Leeds as a student, it was kind of very much the Gang of Four and the Mekons, and that was kind of more my kind of music. But then, kind of after that, came bands like the Sisters of Mercy, and it got a bit more gothic really, which wasn't kind of what we were. So when we were kind of in the process of forming the Lost Pandas and the Wedding Present, it was a bit kind of who are you? You're not wearing fishnet armbands. You obviously don't like the current sound. So it was a bit weird, but I don't know. I think we were quite lucky because John Peel played our first single about 10 times on Radio 1, and after that we kind of almost instantaneously became sort of found an escape route from just playing in Leeds all the time, because people, you'd ring up and say, come and play in Carlisle, and our single was reviewed in the NME and stuff. So it was we were quite lucky to kind of get out of that really, I suppose.
Was that an unusual thing to kind of happen to a band at that point? You say you were kind of quite lucky in that your stuff got picked up quite quickly. Was it an unusual thing? Were there a lot of bands who were kind of trying and that wasn't happening before?
I think there's always loads of bands that are always trying, and in the music industry there's so much about being in the right place at the right time, as anybody will tell you. There's loads of bands I've known who are great, and have never had any success. Conversely, there's bands who are terrible who seem to get money thrown at them all the time. So it's a perverse logic. You can't plan kind of to be successful, I don't think. I say we were lucky, but I think you've got to be a good band. Yeah. But then, I think it fell kind of right for us. And also, it sounds quite weird, but I suppose I kind of grew up listening to that programme, John Peel programme, and he's probably been my biggest influence musically. It sounds weird because most bands will say we're influenced by the Velvet Underground or something, and mine's actually a DJ. But in a way, the music that I make has been kind of sculpted by the music I've heard on that programme. So it was kind of inevitable in a way that he'd like us, because all the bands that he played weren't dissimilar from us anyway. So I was always into The Fall and New Order and stuff. So it was like a natural progression for us to actually be on the programme in a stupid way.
I mean, for quite a long time, you were putting stuff out on your own label. So it was quite a few years before you sort of got sort of signed to RCA. I mean, was that a deliberate decision to sort of do it in a kind of DIY way?
Well, when we made the first single, actually, we recorded it ourselves, and then we sent it off to loads of labels, actually, hoping to get a deal, and everybody said no. We went down to London and met a few people, and we're not kind of looking for this kind of thing at the moment, type things. So we just thought, let's just do it ourselves. So we saved up and got a distribution deal from Red Rhino, who were based in York at the time, who eventually went into liquidation, but nothing to do with us. And we had our own label, and so we did all the early singles on there, and then our first LP, which they funded, but it was our label. And we, obviously after a couple of years, we got more successful, and we spoke to, pretty much every major label, and we decided to kind of stay on our own because it was always a bit kind of patronising, really. We'd meet these people in their offices, and they'd say, yes, you've done very well so far, but we can take you to the next step if you just sign to this label, Polydor or CBS or whatever it was. We can do certain things which will enhance your. And we always thought, well, we don't want to change, and we're quite happy doing things on our own. And then we eventually met RCA, and that was the first time that the A&R person said, okay, you can carry on working exactly in the way you've been working so far. It's almost like we'll keep reception records, but just put it out on RCA. And we said, well, you're going to put that in the contract? And he said, yeah, I will. So it kind of, okay, well, let's sign to RCA. And it was quite timely because, as I say, Red Rhino did go out of business shortly after. So, we were quite lucky, I suppose. And RCA was true to their word. And we did a few albums there. And I've always maintained, because people say, oh, wasn't it weird signing to a major label and all the problems that come with that? And we never experienced any of those problems. I've had more problems with indie labels, to be honest.
But it sounds like you never sort of, obviously, you had kind of significant success over the years, but you never really sort of wanted to be sort of top of the pops kind of level, if you know what I mean. I mean, would that be a fair thing to say?
Yes and no, really. I think I'd be a liar if I said that I didn't want to be successful, because I think part of pop music is wanting to be popular, and you always want people to like the things you do, especially if you've worked hard at them, and you're bearing your soul, and in these lyrics and things. And it's a plea for love, really. And I think obviously it's nice to be successful, but we've never been one of those bands who actually kind of play the game, I suppose. We've always been a bit like I've just mentioned, the Fall in New Order, and I think we were kind of in that mould, really, where we almost exist outside of the music industry, and we just exist. And if people like it, great. But we're not going to, like a lot of people, straight away they have get in a band and move to London, and they think if they're going to be based in London, they're going to meet all the right people in the music industry. They're going to hang out with DJs and press people and record label people, and it is true. But then, in a way, it becomes more important than the actual music. And I think there's so many shit bands in London because they're concentrating too much on business, really. And you go out to cities like Manchester and Glasgow and Leeds, and there's it's much healthier. I think I've always thought that, really.
You must have sort of seen Leeds change quite a lot, sort of over the years you stayed around. I mean, did you sort of keep in touch with the sort of local music scene and bands playing locally and that sort of thing?
Well, when I first came, I was obviously well in touch, and I loved those bands, and then I suppose as I say, it was the Gang of Four and the Mekons at first, and then there's a band called the Butterflies who became Girls at Our Best, who I really loved, and they were one of my favourite groups of all time, really. And then that kind of scene gave way, and it got a bit more like the Three Johns and the Age of Chance and those bands, and that was about the time we were starting as well. So that was a very exciting time. And then I've kind of kept in touch, I suppose. The Pale Saints I used to always really enjoy, and but then I moved to Seattle just when these bands like the Kaiser Chiefs and the music started to come out. So I kind of missed that bit of it, really.
Do you think it's changed much in terms of I mean, for a long time, I mean, it's changed in the past couple of years, like you say, with the Kaiser Chiefs and that sort of thing. But for a long time, it was difficult for bands in Leeds to get sort of A&R interest, to get sort of labels to come up here. I mean, I think a lot of people would have said, you know, a London-based label, you know, if they decide to sign a northern band, they'll go to Manchester or they'll go to Newcastle or even Sheffield, but not really Leeds. I mean, would that be sort of your experience?
I think there's an element of that, but it's kind of historical in a way, isn't it? You know, I think cities have scenes, and I think record labels are kind of, you know, they're not the most forward-thinking of people. Sometimes they say, oh, there's a few bands from Manchester, therefore we'll have to go and sign our Manchester band. And you know, Bristol had it as well when they did that trip-hoppy stuff and everything. So I think there's a certain short-sightedness that bands will suffer from, but Leeds seems to be doing okay again now.
Do you think it's changed much in terms of venues? I mean, you mentioned like things like the F Club. I mean, I don't know whether there's an equivalent of that these days or not really. I mean, they're not kind of small venues, but I mean, would you say there continued to be sort of a lot of good places to play over the years?
No, I think Leeds has struggled there to a certain extent, and I think when I was here as a student, it was definitely healthier. I mean, as I say, that's one of the reasons why I came. And there was loads of little venues, and you know, Haddon Hall, the Royal Park, the Warehouse used to put a lot of bands on, and as I say, the F Club, and then of course the Duchess of York came and went. And I think now it doesn't seem to have quite that, you know, the same number of outlets. And I think I've always envied Sheffield to a certain extent because they've got the Lead Mill, and I think it's a great venue because not only does it attract the kind of national bands and you have those, you know, big bills, but also because they do they've got the 2 rooms, it's a smaller room, so they can have smaller bands on there, and then you have the 5 local band nights and all that kind of stuff. And I think we've never had that in Leeds, which has been a bit of a shame.
And would you say that's something that sort of would be good if it kind of changed? I mean, is anything else that you think ought to change about Leeds musically speaking?
Well, no, I don't think so, actually. I think at the moment, as I say, I think it seems to be this new little scene popping up. You know, it's in the Guardian the other day, wasn't it? So, I mean, I think things must be happening in the right way.
What else can we talk about? I mean, is there something about... Would you say there's any sort of single characteristic that would sort of define a Leeds band? I mean, would you say there's anything that Leeds has perhaps given to you musically or in terms of attitude or whatever over the years?
I think there's definitely an attitude in Leeds. I think it's quite a hard city. I think, you know, I think people are not easily impressed here, which I think is probably a good thing. And I think, you know, there is a kind of feeling when you're playing to a Leeds crowd. It is a bit kind of, all right, go on, impress me then. And I think that it's good in a way because it makes you want to impress people. And I think it's probably one reason why, you know, bands get good because they're trying to, you know, to impress people. So I think that's helpful.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about, I mean, the change from Wedding Present to Cinerama, and then back again. I mean, you probably get asked this a lot. What differentiates between? I mean, what makes it the Wedding Present and what makes it Cinerama? What are the differences?
Well, it's hard to say what the differences between the Wedding Present and Cinerama are now because it's gone a bit blurry, really. I started Cinerama in 1998 primarily because I felt a bit trapped in the kind of format of the Wedding Present, which has always been kind of a, you know, guitar band, and I felt like I wanted to do, you know, different things, and so I mean, at first I thought I'd just do it for a few months, really. I'd just do this little fanning around on my computer and learn about sampling and sequencing and orchestration and, you know, filmic kind of music. And then I found that I really enjoyed doing it. So I suppose I kind of put the Wedding Present on hold, but I thought it would be for 8 months, not 8 years. But then I ended up getting into Cinerama and I really enjoyed it. And I formed a band really around it. And it was primarily kind of supposed to be a different way of thinking about music, really, and writing music and performing music. And the first LP certainly hardly had any guitar on it. It was more keyboardy, I suppose, and strings and brass and stuff. And but then with the 3 Cinerama LPs, each one kind of got more and more guitar-y. I don't know whether it was a conscious thing or whether it was subconscious, but by the time we did the third one, it was kind of like the wedding present again. So after that, and also I suppose Cinerama was always a duo that I'd set with my girlfriend at the time, and initially it was supposed to be like me and her, and then bringing in extra musicians as and when we needed them, a bit like Elvis live in Hawaii, and kind of a little orchestra here and a little band there and backing singers. It never quite never kind of got that far, but that was the idea. And then eventually it became, she left, and it kind of became like a guitar band again. So I just thought, well, we've done this full circle now, really. So, and when we started work on Take Fountain, which is the kind of new wedding present LP, we did actually think it was going to be a Cinerama LP number 4, but then as we started playing it live and working on the songs, we just thought, actually, I'll tell you, it was when we did a Peel session as Cinerama, and it was the first kind of 4 songs we'd been working on or whatever for this new phase. And the engineers were kind of going, David, this is the wedding present. What are you talking about here? You come in here and it's... Because I'd done sessions with Cinerama and we bought strings and flute players and, Hammond organ. And suddenly it was back to these people with guitars again. And they were saying, it's not Cinerama anymore, really, this is it. And I suppose I kind of agreed and said, no, you're right, I suppose. And so we released it as the wedding present. Primarily, so as not to kind of confuse people, disappoint people, really.
What's it like? I noticed at the festival you were playing quite a few sort of the older songs, This Boy Can Wait and that sort of thing. What does it feel like playing the old stuff now?
Sometimes it feels great and sometimes it feels terrible, to be honest. I mean, sometimes it just doesn't work. I don't know why. I don't know whether we've got... some of that stuff is 20 years old, and I think I've changed so much that it just feels weird playing some of those songs now. But then occasionally... Well, not occasionally, quite commonly, we'll look at an old song and it'll sound great, and I think a lot of them actually sound better now because the people in the band now are actually better musicians than we were in 1985 and 1986. So I think they've improved with age. So, but having not done the wedding present for 8 years, I thought it'd be a bit churlish not to do some old songs, and luckily the present band are all up for doing it, so it's been quite... It makes choosing a set a complete nightmare, to be honest, because there's so many. I think it's about 200 songs if you include all the covers and stuff, so to whittle that down to 20 or whatever it is, it's a completely thankless task, to be honest. I don't even do it anymore. I let Simon, the guitarist, do it, because it's so difficult.
And you're back on your own label again, aren't you? For the past few years. Scopitones?
Scopitones,
yeah. I mean, what's it like doing that now, sort of compared to, the initial thing of putting out your own stuff in the 80s? And was it the same sort of mode of operation?
Well, yeah, pretty much, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I think the main difference between now and the 80s is basically a technological difference, in that, because of the advent of hard disk recording or whatever and sampling and stuff, it is a lot cheaper now to actually record. So you don't really need as much capital to actually making an album is basically cheaper. That's what I'm trying to say than it was all those years ago. So that's a good thing. But then obviously on the other side of the same technological coin, you've got these people downloading and burning copies of your CD illegally now. So you don't sell as many. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts, really, I suppose. But yeah, that's the main difference. And I think I'm not totally against downloading and all that stuff, but it does help. It doesn't help small labels. I think like if a band's starting off, it's great because it gets their name around, and I'm sure for EMI and CBS, they can afford to lose a few quid. But for labels like Scopitones, for instance, where every sale counts, it can be quite difficult sometimes.
I wondered whether it was more difficult to kind of get attention now with a small label. Sort of talking to various people sort of run their own labels in Leeds now, common complaint is that it's very, very hard to sort of get the music press to sort of listen to you, which perhaps wasn't the case. Sort of.
No, it was definitely easier in the 80s to get attention from the press. I think. Well, first of all, there was more of it. I mean, we had 3, weekly papers. I used to buy them all, and they were different. Sounds was different from Melody Maker. Melody Maker was different from NME, and I think you had 3 shots at it really, whereas now it's a bit harder. And I think it's kind of compacted really. I mean, as far as I can see, the NME covers the same 6 bands now. It's the same bands every week, and I'm sure it used to be more. I mean, it might be rose-tinted spectacles, but I'm sure it used to be more adventurous and more kind of you put bands on the cover who wouldn't particularly sell the paper because they were confident that their readership would actually like to be challenged by that. But whereas now they seem to feed the readership the same safe options all the time.
What about the radio now?
Well, conversely, I think the radio's got a bit easier because I think you've got these. I think radio is more open-minded. I think with 6 Music and stuff, and XFM. We didn't have XFM, so in my day, it was pretty much John Peel really, and in a way he was almost too powerful because I think if he liked a band, it was pretty certain to help them in their career. But if he didn't like them, it was very difficult. And there were bands I was friends with, like the Membranes from Blackpool, who never got played on Peel, and they were always moaning because they sounded like a Peel band, and it wasn't fair really in a way. But for some reason he didn't like them, and so he never played them, and as a result they struggled, I think. Whereas now I think you've got a few more options. Even Radio 1 during the day, now there's a chance that people will play the odd kind of left field track, whereas in the 80s they wouldn't at all, I don't think.